Now, and for your information, this meeting is being recorded. Before we begin tonight, I would like to take a moment and honor the memory of YWCA employee Amanda Nasofor. She passed away suddenly last week. I feel very emotional about this because, well, I didn't know Amanda. I know members of her family. And she joined the YWCA just under a year ago and was a valued member of the sexual health and wellness team. She is going to be dearly missed by her family and friends and all of the YWCA staff and our community. As is our practice, I would like to honor our connection to the land by respectfully acknowledging that YWCA Edmonton is located in Treaty 6 territory, where many of us are zooming in from tonight. YWCA Edmonton is a traditional gathering place for diverse Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, and others. And today and always, we honor the histories and languages and cultures of these people because they continue to influence our community. I offer my gratitude to the elders, past, present, and future, to whom we turn to for wisdom. So thank you for joining us here this evening. My name is Meghan Klein. Some of you on this call know me originally as Meghan Unterschultz, and I've had the honor of serving as the president for YWCA Edmonton's board for the past year. And tonight my role is to oversee the 114th AGM, and our meeting this evening is being conducted virtually, as you know, in support of the guidelines established by the province to respond to the COVID-19 outbreak. Thank you for your support in attending virtually. I know we all spend a lot of time in front of these screens these days, but your presence at this meeting means a lot to the employees of the YWCA and to the board members. I hope that all of you and your near and dear ones are keeping healthy and staying resilient during these times. For your information, more than 80 people registered for tonight's AGM, including some very special guests, 3 of our MLAs here in Edmonton, Janice Irwin, Rocky Pancholi, and David Shepherd. Welcome, thank you. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to tonight's guest speakers, YWCA Canada CEO Maya Roy and former YWCA Edmonton board president, Julie Charchun, and you'll hear from them later in the meeting. Now, some housekeeping, though I expect that many of us here are pretty much the old hats when it comes to the Zoom room. Please do keep yourself on mute during the AGM. The exception to this is board members who need to unmute to move a motion, or this is also applicable to paid and lifetime members who may want to speak to the motions during the course of the meeting. If you have a question during the meeting, please ask it in the chat box and either I or the other speaker will be notified. And if you have technology issues during the meeting, I urge you to make note of this number. Christine McCourt-Reed is on the meeting with us and she is our troubleshooter. Her number is 780-908-5935. If you have any technology problems, just send her a text and she's going to guide you through it. So only paid and lifetime members and board members are eligible to vote during this meeting. And as we are virtual, I can't see everybody on the screen. So when passing a motion, anybody, not just me, anyone who's passing a motion will assume that you support the motion unless you object or abstain. And we'll give you time after each motion is tabled to do so. If you are moving or seconding a motion, please state your full name so that it can be correctly recorded in the minutes, and then say I move or I second. And if you have a question or comment during the meeting, also please state your full name and then raise your question or comment. So quorum for our AGM is 20 members, And as you know, since I'm speaking, I have confirmation we've got quorum today. So thank you for everyone for joining us. We have staff, we have lifetime members, special guests, board members at the meeting tonight, and I am delighted you've made the time to attend and express your loyalty and support for this agency. So I would like to say a special call out to our lifetime members. You helped shape this organization into what it is today over many years, and it's a privilege to have so many of you here with us tonight. I also want to state right from the top my wholehearted thanks as board president, but also just as a supporter of the YW. Thank you to the fantastic management team and all of the staff and volunteers of the agency. Many of you are on the call today. This word is way overused, but this was an unprecedented year, and all of you really more than rose to the challenge. So I'm inspired by your dedication and your passion for the YWCA and the community we support. Thank you for everything you do every day. I'm a very strong believer that the more good you put out into the world, the more good will return to you. So I know that so much good is coming to all of you for everything that you do. This organization just wouldn't be what it is today without all of your work. So we're now on to the business portion of the meeting. The first business piece is to appoint a recording secretary. So our practice is that the executive assistant to the CEO will take minutes. And thank you to Hibo Mohammed. She is here with us tonight. And I would like to ask if somebody will move a motion to appoint Hibo Mohammed as our recording secretary tonight. And a reminder to please take yourself off mute and say your full name if you are volunteering to move that motion.
Kathleen Hatton-Lake, I'll move that motion.
Thank you, Kathleen. And do I have a seconder?
Kim Pace will second.
Thank you, Kim. While I don't expect there are any objections or abstentions from this vote, any discussion? Hearing none, I move all in favor of appointing Hibo Mohammed as our recording secretary. All right, no oppositions or abstentions, the motion is carried. Next, I'll call for approval of the agenda for the annual general meeting. If you are a voting member, you should have been provided with all of the meeting materials. May I ask that someone move a motion to approve the meeting agenda as it was presented?
I'll move. Francesca Gossain.
Thank you, Francesca. May I have a seconder?
I'll second Marina Bannister.
Thank you, Marina. Any discussion, any changes desired? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of approving the meeting agenda as presented? Any opposed? All right, the motion is carried. One more of these folks. Next, I'd like to ask for the approval of the minutes of the 113th annual general meeting, which was held on April 22nd, 2020. Can I have somebody move to approve the minutes of last year's AGM as presented?
Yes, Valencianard.
Thank you, Fallon. And may I have a seconder?
Irina Hilliard.
Thank you, Irina. Is there any discussion or any changes that people would like to bring forward for last year's minutes? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor of approving the minutes of the 113th annual general meeting as presented? Anyone opposed? All right, the motion is carried. So next up is my report as president. And I really was reflecting on the Cree, or I'm trying to use the Nehiya word, which is the preferred word of the Cree people. So I am told, at least from my friend. I was really reflecting on the principle of Wakotowin, and I understand that to mean the sacred interconnectedness of all relationships, whether that's relationships with the land and natural systems of our world, with our communities, and with each other as human beings. I simply can't imagine a better principle to sum up both the grief and the hope of this past year as we navigated a global pandemic. Now, we're all well aware that the COVID-19 virus swept the world this past year, and in a short time, really it's a year, it has had massive impacts on our way of life, the way we work and play, how we teach our children, how our economy works, how our government supports us, and on our freedoms. And we have endured this loss of connection, kept physically apart from our loved ones, and we've also been kept distant from our communities and all of those types of connections we took for granted. However, though none of us would have wished for this, I think there's a lot of good here too. We have become very creative, as humans are so good at being, coming together, I mean, without actually coming together, of course, as communities and as a world to triumph in ways that are big and small to collectively navigate hardships. And I am so proud to be part of an organization like YWCA Edmonton, which has remained steadfast and strong amidst so many upheavals this past year. And 2020 was a year full of changes and surprises. On March 16, 2020, this was a momentous day for the agency because we welcomed a new CEO, Katherine O'Neill. Of course, this date will go down in history for other reasons. It was also the day that our province, among many other jurisdictions around the globe, mandated a lockdown to stem the spread of the COVID virus. And we've been in varying states of lockdown ever since. But I feel that Katherine has stepped into the role, made it her own, and capably led the YWCA team through a year of unparalleled change. And it required a lot of hard work for the board and the management team and the staff and everybody. There was certainly no easing in period. Katherine had to hit the ground running on day one to respond to this global pandemic, which we haven't seen in our world for over a century. But wow, did this team rally and come up with amazing and innovative ways to continue serving our community, even under all the pandemic restrictions and all the rapid program adjustments that had to be made. Despite all of that upheaval, the YW team really focused energy on strategic growth to strengthen our foundation as an agency and support the community during economic and social health environments that were really complex and shifting rapidly. So, having said that, there are so many accomplishments to celebrate this past year and far too many to recite in the time we have tonight, but I will draw your attention to 3 achievements that I think are tied to that idea of relationships that is really forefront in my mind. We presented as YWCA a balanced budget in a year when multiple sources of revenue were greatly diminished due to pandemic-imposed restrictions. And I want to thank the Finance and Audit team or committee and the management team for working so closely together to maintain attention on the organization's financial health when there were a lot of other things to pay attention to. And thank you to the external relations team. You built relationships with funders and sponsors and donors in the community to not only meet but exceed our fundraising targets, which is an exceptional accomplishment in any year, but especially last year. And recognizing again the importance of relationships, YWCA Edmonton was instrumental in crafting a provincial advocacy response with the other 3 YWCAs in Alberta to push for a feminist post-pandemic recovery plan. And that was really a great accomplishment as well. And third, we looked to relationships in the community by raising the profile of YWCA and women in leadership through all sorts of creative collaborations and projects like the Power Lunch series and the Searching for Izina project. And if these are unfamiliar terms to you, I encourage you to check it out on the YW website and social media channels. In a year when so many other organizations were focused on survival, YWCA looked to grow our base of support and reconnect with past friends and allies and supporters, and so many of you are here tonight. We were also very busy as a board. While we dearly missed getting together in person, we adapted to virtual meetings and were able to accomplish our mandate. We called together a continuity through crisis working group to support management in those early weeks and months of the pandemic. And we worked our board objectives for the year and built a schedule of board development activities and regular education sessions. Our theme this year was fund development and a continuation of the previous year's focus on reconciliation, with a real eye this year toward anti-racist practices and a more inclusive recruitment for board nominations. And I think we had a really successful board recruitment this year that speaks to our ability to reach into different communities that we weren't accessing before. We also, as a board, worked with management with the new strategic plan that was established last year. Management came forward with some really amazing concrete goals and an ambitious action plan that the board endorsed at our strategic retreat. And given the really devastating impacts of the pandemic on women in particular, the board collectively decided to focus our advocacy efforts on women's post-pandemic economic recovery, while also making ongoing progress toward equity, diversity, and inclusion a continued priority. So now it's time for the thank yous. And I am so grateful to YWCA's leadership team and all the staff and volunteers for the incredible efforts you contributed this year. Each of us has been living with unexpected and often difficult pressures this past year in our personal circumstances, and yet this team did not falter or hesitate. You just rose to the challenge and invited the rest of us to keep up with you. Thank you, Katherine, for your inspiring leadership in a first year for the books. And thank you to the leadership team, Jamie Dean, Terry Conye, Ashley Lim, Kathy McDonald, and Amber Niemeyer. And I'll also send a thank you to Quinn Cadman, who left halfway through the year. And thank you to the staff and volunteers. I especially want to do a call out to Amber. She was our interim CEO for the first months of 2020 and just did a great job leading the organization in this time. I also offer my deep gratitude to the members of the board. I don't know when I've had the privilege of working with a more dedicated group of inspiring women leaders, and I'm so grateful to you for your leadership of this agency and just being in the community and leading from where you're at. I'm eager to welcome Aram, Sasha, and May, the incredible women joining our board this year, but I have to say it's done with a bit of a bittersweet heart because it means I'm saying farewell to our outgoing board members. So thank you to Valencianard, Lena Hozema, and Rebecca Lee for everything you have given. You are always going to be valued members of the YW community, and I know we will certainly continue to find ways to connect. And now this is the most important thank you I have to offer. Thank you to every single employee of the YWCA Edmonton. Speeches like these, it's often the visible leaders of the organization who get all the accolades and thank yous, but I want to assure you that from my perspective, it's you, the employees and volunteers of this organization. You're the reason it is what it is today. And you're there on the front lines. You're helping people. You are serving the community. You are doing the work. And I can only say thank you. Please know your incredible efforts are noticed, they're appreciated, and you make such an important difference. Thank you. So with that, it has been my honor and my privilege to serve as YWCA Edmonton's board president this past year. I know the relationships I've forged through my work on this board are among the richest and most motivating of my life. I look forward to my next year on the board serving alongside these amazing women who are stepping into their board executive roles. Thank you. And with that, I would now like to introduce you to our Chief Executive Officer, Katherine O'Neill, who will present her report.
Thank you so much, Megan. And before I begin my official remarks, I actually want to directly thank you, Megan, for your tireless leadership during the past year. Not everyone knows this, but Meghan, like myself, also began a senior leadership role just as the pandemic was beginning in the spring of 2020. She's the executive director at the Edmonton Mennonite Center for Newcomers. So over the past year, we've often traded notes and kept each other motivated during the highs and lows of 2020. And it's been a great honor to co-pilot YWCA Edmonton with you during such an historic and unprecedented time for our community. So now to my official remarks. Welcome everyone. It's so great to see you online. I wish I could see you in person, to hug you, to thank you directly. To start, I want to just start with taking you on a bit of a trip of sorts to a very chilly February day, just a few weeks before COVID entered the picture and changed all of our lives forever. This story begins in a historic red brick armory located just north of the downtown in Edmonton. It's a place that houses our city's past, our stories. In preparation for this new job, I had trekked to the Edmonton archive to research YWCA Edmonton. And little did I know that what I had found that day would later serve to inspire me, to humble me, and to even uplift and motivate me, often during some of the darkest and hardest hours that 2020 would throw our way. In between 4 very thick file folders were these countless stories of the brave, fearless, and inspiring women who have led YWCA Edmonton since 1907. From the 1918 Spanish pandemic to 2 world wars, to the Great Depression, and so many hard, transformative moments in time, I found examples of courage and innovation and grit. And these women always responded to unspeakable pain, unspeakable hardship, and unspeakable uncertainty in our community with extraordinary compassion, extraordinary leadership, and extraordinary determination to build a better tomorrow, one that includes everyone. I hope in a very small way, YWCA Edmonton's work in 2020 and our response to COVID pays tribute to those past YWCA leaders and staff. It is no secret that this once in a century pandemic has disproportionately affected women, girls, and gender diverse people, including a rise in gender-based violence, unpaid labor, job losses. So as an organization, we not only work day and night to help women and families when and where they needed us most during this crisis, including whether it was by offering high quality disability services to adults and children, a record number of affordable counseling sessions, new online youth leadership and sexual health programs, or even safe outdoor activities at Camp Ywuca's. But we also significantly during the past year increased our advocacy work with our fellow YWCAs in Alberta and YWCA Canada to ensure that the big, long-standing structural challenges and inequities that face our society are finally going to be addressed and worked on, including increasing access to affordable childcare. And while important progress has been made on all these things, we will not let up on our work to create a world with equality, opportunity, and choice for all. That may seem like a dream to some, but not at YWCA Edmonton. It guides every single thing we do. So what's next? We still need your help. This crisis is far from over, and we would have never been able to keep our doors open for 114 years without you. So please stay involved and engaged, whether it's volunteering on our board, becoming a donor, attending our Rose Campaign fundraiser, visiting Camp Ywuca's, or working on special initiatives like the Searching for Izina project. We need your assistance to continue serving women and families in our community. So in conclusion, I'd like to thank our YWCA Board of Directors and alumni who helped guide our organization through this extraordinary time. Thanks also to our funders, donors, sponsors, volunteers who just never wavered in their support to help ensure our mission and work never stopped. Lastly, thank you to our senior leadership team and employees for your compassion, creativity, and doggedness. You are healers, bridge builders, fixers, change makers, all rolled into one. and your selflessness and service to others during this very dark moment in history will inspire many today and in the years to come. So thank you. And I'd now like to hand over the meeting to our treasurer and chair of the Finance and Audit Committee, Irina Hilliard, for her report.
Good evening, and thank you, Catherine. Please note that there are copies of the entire financial statements that have been shared in the chat. I'm very happy to report that our auditors, MNP, issued an unqualified opinion on our financial statements. An unqualified opinion means that the independent auditor has deemed that our financial records and statements are fairly and appropriately presented in accordance with Canadian accounting standards for nonprofit organizations. This is a great achievement. A big thank you to our CEO, Katherine, thank you, and to our financial director, Jamie, and Tracy for their hard work to keep this level of excellence. Thank you to the incredible team effort and laser focus on ensuring that the pandemic did not negatively affect the YWCA Edmonton. The 114-year-old organization is ending 2020 on a solid financial footing. What an amazing achievement. When COVID-19 first hit in March of 2020, Management and Finance and Audit Committee responded quickly and met weekly in the beginning to ensure short-term and long-term finances of YWCA Edmonton remain stable. At the start of the crisis, it was unclear how YWCA Edmonton would be able to use its original 2020 budget. Everything has changed. There were serious questions and concerns surrounding the organization's planned fundraising efforts. There were also grave concerns around the finances of Camp Ywuca, which was operated on the shores of Lake Waldman since 1916. But thanks to the dedication, ingenuity, and hard work of the management, YWCA Edmonton was able to tighten the budgets where possible and pivot all of its programs and services to ensure that we continue to help women and families in our community. Incredibly, YWCA Edmonton fundraising team were able to slightly exceed their original fundraising goal after having to cancel our marquee fundraising event, Walk a Mile. Again, a massive achievement. Thank you. After all of this hard work, we ended the year with an overall revenue of about 11.2 million, which is around 11.6% lower compared to prior year. That being said, our expenses also decreased by 1.3 million, which is about 10.6% compared to prior year, resulting in a profit of $209,000. This was largely due to an expired government grant. YWCA Edmonton also benefit from many federal government assistance programs such as wage subsidies and rent subsidies. We recognize that the Alberta economy is always unpredictable, and we know that many people are facing employment and investment uncertainties. That is why we're grateful for each and every dollar that comes to the YWCA and each and every donor, funder, contractor, and sponsor who gives us money or services. Many donors, funders, contractors, and sponsors are on this call tonight. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions on the financial statements presented? Okay. I move that the Treasurer's report and the audited financial statements for the year ending December 31st, 2020 be accepted as circulated. May I have someone? Oh.
Sorry, go ahead, Irina.
I was going to say, may I have someone to second the motion?
I second the motion, Pamela Zerlich.
Thank you, Pamela. Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, I will call for a vote. All in favor of approving the Treasurer's report and the audited financial statements as presented? Any opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. I have one more duty to perform as treasurer. Every AGM, we appoint an auditor for upcoming year. 2020 was our ninth year working with MNP under the direction of Patrick Moore. He's the partner at MNP. Once again, Patrick and his team has provided an outstanding service, and were wonderful to work with. MNP works with us year-round to ensure our books and our records and our business is sound. We're very grateful to have their counsel. Thank you. I move that MNP be appointed the official auditors for the YWCA Edmonton for the year ending December 31st, 2021. May I have someone second the motion?
I second Dow Haddad.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? Any further discussion? Sorry. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, I call for a vote. All in favor of approving the... Wait a second. All in favor of appointing MNP as our auditors for 2021? Thank you. Any opposed? A motion is carried. That's my report, but before I hand back the microphone, I think it's important to note that 2020 was also marked by departure in November of our controller, Quinn Cadman. I want to thank Quinn for all of his hard work over the years. The role was renamed Director of Finance and Operations, and we welcome Jamie Dean to the position, and we're happy to report that she has quickly gotten up to speed with the new role during the unprecedented once-in-a-century pandemic. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Tracy, for doing a great job in the finance department. We appreciate how hard you work to keep our records and processes clean. Lastly, thank you, Katherine, for your outstanding leadership. Thank you again to our hardworking Finance and Audit Committee for the above and beyond volunteer efforts this year. It's been a whirlwind. Thank you also to our funders, our donors for the continued support during these challenging times. You're the reason the YWCA continues to be a community leader in advocacy, counseling services, disability services, sexual health and wellness, youth programs, and outdoor experiences. Finally, after 2 years as treasurer, I also am pleased to be continuing the treasurer role in the upcoming year. Thank you. I would like to hand over the board to the board chair of the HR Nominating Committee, Kathleen, for her report. Thank you.
Thank you, Irina. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kathleen Hatton-Lake, and I have the honor of chairing the HR and Nominating Committee this past year. I'm very fortunate that I got to work with an amazing team. I want to thank my fellow committee members, Kim Pays, Francesca Elgosson, Rebecca Lee, and Valencianard, who may not have technically been a committee member, but might as well have been. I also want to thank Meghan Klein, who as our board president was an ex officio member, but really was just a member who participated and did as much work as everyone else. And I also want to thank Katherine O'Neill, our CEO, who served as an ex officio member and showed up all the time, including in very trying circumstances. Katherine's nodding because at one point she managed to break a bone and still showed up for our board interviews. So she is a committed and dedicated member of this committee, as well as Hibo Mohammed, who provided administrative support. So thank you both. I am certainly highly appreciative of all the work you do in sometimes extra trying circumstances. The mandate of the HR Nominating Committee is to recruit qualified board members to serve our governance mandate. And we began soliciting for nominations for new board members in December 2020. As a committee, we are looking to broaden our sourcing strategy to attract a diverse pool of candidates. We specifically sought candidates with experience and awareness of issues relating to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities, fundraising and finance expertise, as well as a youth volunteer and civic leader. The reason for those categories is before we solicit applications, we always complete a skills assessment of our board that shows where we need to bring on candidates with certain skills. I'm delighted to say that we had 23 amazing women apply to be on our board and that we interviewed 9 women. I want to also note, because we have so many of our alumni and supporters here, that the reason we have so many amazing candidates year to year is because you recommend this board to people and you support this organization. There are countless people who come forward who have heard about it or been encouraged to join to apply for the board because of you. So thank you, and please keep doing so, because it is We truly have a wealth of wonderful women who apply for the board, and it makes the job of the HR and Nominating Committee difficult, but also delightful. The interviews were all incredible. We have presented 3 candidates for joining our board of directors this year. Their biographies have been distributed to you this evening. And I want to just note, before we move to voting on this, that this is always a difficult selection process. Every interview that we had this year was truly a delight. Everyone was an incredible woman who I was delighted and would have been delighted to have on this board. There are many organizations that would be envious of the position that we are in. And it is a testament to the great work of the organization and the staff and members and our alumni who put us in this wonderful position. I move now to appoint the following slate of candidates to stand as directors for the YWCA Edmonton Board of Directors for their first 3-year term to end in April 2024. And we have Aram Asfar, Meghan, and Sasha Gladue. May I have a seconder?
Kim Pace will second.
Thank you, Kim. Any further comments or discussion? Hearing no further discussion, I'll call the vote. As per usual, with no no's, I'm going to assume your response is in favor of the motion unless you speak up to oppose or abstain. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is carried. Welcome, Sasha, May, and Aram. We're delighted to have you here. We have a tradition that new board members receive the YWCA Canada pin upon election, and I'm looking forward to distribute these pins when we're able to meet in person again, including to our last year's new board members who I think are still waiting to get to meet in person for their pins. We also have 2 current board members who've completed their first 3-year terms and would like to continue to serve on the board for the second 3-year term. This commitment demonstrates that the engagement level of our board and supports our board through board stability. And those 2 members are Meghan Klein and Lena Bannister, who are both incredible valued members of our board. Meghan Klein, of course, is going to be the past president, who will be staying on to provide ongoing support to the executive committee. And Lena Bannister is the chair of our advocacy committee and an incredible advocate in our community. I'm delighted for them both. I want to just note here, and I think Katherine has spoken to this already, but I do want to say I don't think Meghan realized she was signing up for a full year of remote meetings and board presidency, but she has been a constant both to staff and her relationship with Katherine, but also to our board of directors. She has tirelessly thrown herself into being the president of the YWCA, and as I said, has been involved in committees and our fearless leader throughout this pandemic. So I am delighted that Meghan is staying on, and I want to thank her for her service as our board president. So with that, I would now move to appoint the following directors to a second 3-year term to end in April 2024. Lena Bannister and Meghan Klein. May I have a seconder?
Yeah, Valencianard.
Thank you, Fallon. Any further discussion on this motion? Hearing no further discussion, I'll call the vote. I'll assume your response is in favor unless you speak up to oppose or abstain. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried. Thank you. It does feel rather odd to have the silence throughout for everyone, but I do feel like we should have a thumbs up for something. Thank you both for your continued support, Meghan and Lena. My next motion, because apparently I'm the motion maker of this particular meeting, is that our bylaws state that we must elect the chair of the HR and Nominating Committee at this meeting. I'm delighted to say that Francesca Algosson, who is on our HR and Nominating Committee this year, is interested in being a leader of it. And I would make a motion to appoint Francesca as the chair of the HR Nominating Committee for 2022 or 2021 to 2022. Can I have a seconder?
Kim Pace. I'll
Bannister.
second.
I'll take Kim for that one. Any discussion on this motion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. So I will take that motion as carried. My last order of business is to thank our 3 outgoing board members, Rebecca Lee, Valencianard, and Lena Hozema. These 3 incredible women have played key leadership roles on our board and made us better as a community and as a board. I want to briefly tell you a little bit about each of them because I think they are very special and I think that they should be honored in this way. So Rebecca Lee joined the YWCA board 3 years ago and was the vice president for 2 years. She is a connector. She brings people together to collaborate and was critical to building us into a team as a board. Personally, some of the questions Rebecca has asked at board meetings, particularly around diversity and inclusion, have stuck with me and are still ones that I think of and that challenge me and that I reflect on. Her insight and her knowledge will be missed, but those questions hopefully will still stay with us and keep us challenging ourselves. Meghan Klein's comment was that Rebecca encouraged us as a team and as individuals to look beneath the surface, whether it was by facilitating team building or icebreaker activities, or by asking brave and probing questions during our discussion. Rebecca helped us learn more about our motivations and how to work together for a common purpose. Rebecca brings clarity and insight to every team, and I will miss her on the HR Nominating Committee. She has shaped our recruitment process and brought clarity that allowed us to increase the number of candidates who applied for the board and allowed us to really focus on bringing certain skill sets and a diversity of candidates. Rebecca, thank you for all your work. Our second outgoing board member is Lena Hozema. Lena joined the board 2 years ago and brought her expertise in fundraising and fund development. She lent her expertise to our philanthropy committee and brought her critical thinking skills to our board meetings, always asking us questions to push deeper. And Meghan said of that Lena's curiosity and strong interest in the work and results of the YWCA led to many questions and discussions. Lena did not take things at face value, and her questions helped us dig deeper into topics and issues. Lena, thank you for our work. Our last outgoing board member of this year is Valencianard. Fallon is perhaps one of the most competent people I have ever met. She is a doer, and she improves everything she touches. I had the privilege of working with Fallon on our HR Nominating Committee, where she made the process of recruitment of new board candidates seamless and upheld the YWCA's reputation for excellence. Meghan stated that Fallon is one of those rare individuals who sees what needs to be done and just goes ahead to do it, often quietly and without fanfare in the background, making all the effort she puts look effortless from the outside. Our recruitment processes are better streamlined and more effective thanks to Fallon's involvement. As chair of the HR Nominating Committee, I can say that is certainly true, and that Fallon made my job, at least as the chair, very easy to do in an incredibly considerate, kind, and just like I said, the most competent person I've ever met way. So Fallon, we will miss you and all your work, and perhaps unsurprising to anyone given the comments I just made, she also produced an intensive transition document for whoever is taking over her role for next time. She is nothing if not thorough, but thank you for all your work, and you will certainly be missed. I'll now hand the meeting back to Meghan, but thank you to everyone for all the board, for all your work, and for you for all listening.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Well, now we get to, for me, the most exciting part of the night, our guest speakers. So you won't hear much from me tonight, but as you know from listening already, advocacy work has been very key to YWCA Edmonton's efforts in 2020, and we have two special guest speakers joining us tonight to talk about this important work. So I'm inviting Katherine back to introduce us, and you'll hear from me at the very end. That's it.
Well, thank you. And thank you, everyone. Again, like Meghan said, advocacy has just been such a critical thing, a big part of what we've been doing in Edmonton. But what's so great about being part of the YWCA family is that we have YWs across the country and YWCA Canada and YWCAs across the world who are on the front lines of this pandemic in real time, seeing what's happening. And we were working together every week meeting. And that's the great thing about Zoom. We can be on Zoom, talking, sharing information, and really figuring out a battle plan to make sure that no woman, no girl, or no family is left behind in this crisis. So I'm so honored that our guest speaker tonight is YWCA Canada CEO Maya Roy. She is a personal hero to me. She has worked tirelessly through this pandemic with her team, including AGM, who I know is on the call as well, to talk to governments across the country, to businesses, and to figure out a feminist recovery plan that will work for everyone. Before Maya begins and talks about what we've been seeing nationally, I want to tell you a bit about Maya. She's a diversity specialist with 22 years of experience in a variety of sectors in public policy development, public health, adult education, and social work. She's also has a Bachelor of Social Work from the Ryerson School of Social Work and has a Master's in Social Policy and Planning from the London School of Economics. Her full bio will be posted in the chat box. And I really also, so Maya, take it away, but she's also joining us from Toronto tonight. So there's a bit of a time difference. So we really thank you again, Maya, for coming and zooming into this meeting and sharing all of this important information. Over to you, Maya.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Katherine, for all of your leadership and for inviting me here this evening. I do remember, as you were telling that story of trudging in the snow on that February day, you and I also had a phone call in February, and literally you and I were getting the World Health Organization stats and started, oh, this COVID, this is going to be big. This is going to be serious. So remember that conversation fondly. And here we are, my goodness, almost 14 months later. And congratulations to the whole team, the senior leadership team, the board, and especially your frontline staff for keeping operations going through such a difficult time. Good evening or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maya Roy. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm zooming in this evening from the territory of the Mississaugas, New Credit Nation in Southern Ontario. I'm very pleased to be speaking with you around some of our joint advocacy. And I'm just very quickly going to share my screen. Can everybody see? Oops. That's
yes.
Not what I had planned on doing. Apologies, I'm not very tech savvy. Everybody can see the PDF? Wonderful. As Katherine mentioned, YWCA Edmonton just does so much incredible advocacy work in the community, but also working with the other 3 YWCAs in Alberta. And as Katherine and I were chatting, we thought it might be helpful to talk a little bit about how do we do our work together? And it's so important because when we have your expertise, your knowledge on the ground, colleagues such as AGM and myself at the national office, we can then take your stories and expertise and funnel it up to policymakers in Ottawa. And one of the questions that AGM and I ask ourselves quite frequently is what is it that we can do where we're stronger together? And that's going to be the theme as I'll take you through. I think one of the reasons, as Katherine was saying, YWCA has survived the previous pandemic, world wars, the depression, is because we have that alignment and because we have colleagues such as yourselves who are actually doing that really important frontline work on the ground. And for us, it's about talking about that alignment. And I love your mission statement, advocate for equity through a women's perspective, educating, empowering, and inspiring those we serve. That just gives me goosebumps. And when I was looking at your annual report and how you also talked about as the world stood still, YWCA Edmonton just kept going. And I certainly saw that through our touch points, through your social media, and you know, as community members, we're talking about the really important needs. So for a lot of what we've been doing at YWCA Canada is, what does that alignment look like? And what does that network, what does that movement building look like? And in one of the things that we rolled out during COVID was actually our new tagline, in part in thanks to colleagues such as yourselves. Really big thank you to Amber Newmeyer, who has provided a lot of strategic advice around branding and UNCSW and policy over the years, and colleagues like Ashley Lim. And I'll be talking a little bit about some of the joint pieces we've done. But one of the things that we did over the past year is underwent a whole branding refresh exercise. And you're probably asking yourself, well, what does branding have to do with advocacy? Well, Amber can certainly tell you, and so did many of the board members and YWCA Edmonton service users and staff who participated in our focus groups. And we essentially did a process where all of our membership settled on a new tagline called National Advocacy, Community Action, really to get at that relationship of how we all work together in a federation. So for those of us at the national office, it's about doing that government relations work, that advocacy work, giving that pan-Canadian perspective from the 31 YWCAs across the country. As we know, the world does not revolve around Toronto, and it certainly doesn't revolve around the Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto corridor. So how do we get your expertise, your knowledge to folks who are making decisions? With the fact that you've been doing that community action work for over 114 years, and YWCA Canada is actually celebrating our 151st year this year. So that really gives us an opportunity to think about, you know, what does people-powered systemic change look like? And if we were going to ask, what does people power look like? Why not ask it in a year where we not only have a global pandemic, but one of the worst economic crises and depressions, as Katherine mentioned, since the late 20s. So certainly gave us an opportunity to test how we do our work. And one of the very first calls that Katherine and I were on with our senior leadership, the 31 CEOs across the country, you know, YWCA Banff was talking about how, you know, people are going to be studying this crisis. We're going to be tested as leaders. And I know when you pivoted your fundraising on a dime last year and invited me to the wonderful power portrait lunches that you were doing with your donors, it was a real opportunity to talk about, okay, we can do fear-based leadership, but as Katherine was talking about as she was going through the archives, you know, what does leading with empathy look like? What does leading with kindness and courage look like? And I think certainly YWCA can speak to that over the past 151 years. Some of the ways that we work together on advocacy in the past has involved, for example, member association members informing how we do work on Day on the Hill. So it was actually YWCA Edmonton that said at our very first Day on the Hill in Ottawa, we need to focus on one issue, and that issue has to be affordable housing. And that is huge, because when YWCA Edmonton said that on the call, there was a complete shift with how the whole movement started thinking about, you know, what does it look like to go to Ottawa and talk about a common issue or talk about something that's impacting women and gender diverse community members across the country. Also, the entire Federation looks to you with respect around best practices in mental health and good governance through peer support. I have to share, when Ashley came to a number of our sector calls where either we had frontline staff or CEOs, hearing about how you do work in mental health, people opened up in a way that I certainly haven't seen. So I think those best practices is something we want to continue, basically, humble bragging your work across the country, and other YWCAs are very interested. And last but certainly not least, co-creating and participating in the feminist economic recovery. So it was really wonderful. Catherine O'Neill was invited to actually speak to a table of federal, provincial, and territorial ministers about the impacts of COVID with respects to domestic violence and mental health. And it was so important for them to hear not just about the incredible work that you're doing on the ground in Edmonton, but the fact that all 4 Alberta MAs meet weekly and actually worked together on different initiatives. And I have to share with you, I share that story, your story of the 4 Alberta MAs quite frequently, because we also know when we're in a crisis, no one 10 years from now is going to be thinking who disagreed with vaccine rollout or who was frustrated with this. At the end of the day, people just want their loved ones safe, right? And I think what the 4 Alberta YWCAs are showing to politicians across Alberta, but also across the country, when Katherine addressed the FPT table, was it's about looking at what can we agree on and how can we advocate together for the common good. Canada being a federation just like YWCA. And I think that modeling and setting the tone with that higher leadership has been really, really important, because we also know sometimes politicians of all political stripes can get a little naughty, and we need them to focus on important things like gender equity and access to childcare. So just wanted to give you a sense of some of the kinds of things that we've worked together on. When I mentioned earlier that, people, YWCA Banff was talking about, this is going to be studied. Well, it wasn't long before universities came calling, and happy to share with any of you on the call. We actually do have a case study done by an external reviewer who looked at how member associations such as yourselves and YWCA Canada collaborated through the crisis. But, why are talking about advocacy, and does advocacy really work? And especially when everybody's on social media and we have Trump screaming on Twitter, why are we doing all of this advocacy? Well, as Katherine shared and as your frontline staff, talked about through your work, we know that COVID is disproportionately impacting women. And we also knew that this was really going to impact us as a federation, and that we wanted to not just survive, but actually thrive through this period. So I'd really like to congratulate the entire senior leadership team, Katherine and the board for the audit results, because that is not easy. And that is certainly not easy while you're trying to do it on a screen, staring at a box the size of a postage stamp on Zoom, communicating. So I think that, again, just really speaks to your leadership and your commitment to the community. We also knew, and so glad that my colleague Anjum was able to join us today. She's supposed to be on vacation, but Anjum never takes a day off. So, Anjum brought very early on to the CEOs and the Federation, the Hawaii Feminist Economic Recovery, and started talking about the importance of care work with me. And she pitched this idea to the CEOs and said, would you like to talk about what would a feminist economic recovery look like? Because the federal government will need to be thinking about solutions. And for those of you who are doing this work on the front lines, you know exactly what's happening and you know what the solutions need to be. And that essentially became the foundation of our advocacy strategy in the past year, that co-creation, that dialogue back and forth. AGM was the primary author of the Feminist Economic Recovery Plan. I'll pop the link into the chat after. I won't take you through all of it, but what we were really hearing from frontline staff on the ground was that, you know, they wanted to see solutions in the 8 sections. So for example, YWCA, and so thrilled to see the really diverse board and all of the focus that you're doing around truth and reconciliation. YWCA was talking about addressing the root causes of systemic racism. And we knew with COVID, things unfortunately would get worse. And unfortunately, we're seeing that with an increase in hate crimes. We also knew that we potentially would have an opportunity around childcare and how important childcare is for economic recovery and getting community members back to work, because we also know that Alberta was hurting even before COVID with the recession. And we want to keep young people. We want to keep our workers in Alberta. And if they're moving to other parts of the country, we want that to keep that, to pipeline that talent. So what made our plan different? And I think, again, going back to your work, it was the first nationally focused plan, but more importantly, using your expertise and knowledge, starting to think about what does it mean to address gender-based violence in the time of a pandemic. And for example, being able to talk about your mental health program, the waiting lists, the really important work that you're doing with the sanctuary on the lake, turning the camp into a social enterprise. Those are the kinds of really interesting examples of innovation that Canadians want to hear about, and more importantly, something that we can share across the country. So how did we collaborate? I like to call what we did the tiramisu model of advocacy. And really it was about layering your local expertise and wisdom, your priorities that you were seeing with the national office, adding a layer of what potentially a pan-Canadian strategy could look like. So thank you to all of you who either signed petitions or sent letters or wrote op-eds. With our feminist advocacy strategy in 2020, AGM did a lot of really diligent work, and I was actually able to get over 300 media interviews and webinars. And it was so wonderful to see Katherine and other YWCA Edmonton staff, not just speaking locally to the issues, but also setting up interviews for Edmonton staff for your information to be syndicated across the country. And so as we wrap up this difficult year and this long pandemic that seems to be dragging on, we know that policymakers are starting to think about recovery. And what we're starting to see because of your work, because of our partnership together around advocacy, that there's a number of competitive advantage windows that we're seeing for YWCA. It's to talk about recovery, and especially your work on the ground is an opportunity for Canada to build back better. And so we've been positioning your work with policymakers and stakeholders in that light. And what we're really hearing is that the needs of women, Two-Spirit and gender diverse community members, your service users, your frontline staff, really need to be centered to inform policymaking and budgeting. And we really wanted to position our members like you as that voice, that go-to expert. So very pleased, we started talking about this a year ago. Here we are sort of 13 months in, and just wanted to share with you, since we last spoke at the Power Lunch, just some touch points around progress, and then very quickly I'll sort of wrap up the federal budget and what maybe you might want to think about for future advocacy depending on your interests. So I'm very pleased to say, because of that reciprocal federation model of working together, working in layers and adding our different layers of expertise, we actually were able to influence the throne speech. And that's no small task during a pandemic, during an American election, and also during an economic recession. And again, I think it's because of that combination of the local expertise with the Pan-Canadian viewpoint. So we were actually able to get a lot of your language into the throne speech. So for example, it talks about a feminist intersectional response. It talks about an action plan for women in the economy. And YWCA Canada, like many women's organizations, we've been talking about childcare since the early 60s, definitely since the Status of Women Commission. So again, I think really this is a testament to your work, and very much would like to thank my team as well, Anjum and Rain, who did so much work around this. It was very interesting, all the work we did around childcare. I actually, for those of you who've been parents through the pandemic, I honestly don't know how you've done it as working full-time, homeschooling. And, I keep joking about, to my friends' kids, wanting to send my friends organic wine via drone, because really we need some kind of solution, and simply we know that working full-time with no childcare is simply not working. And this is the first time after decades of advocacy by the women's sector, by women and gender diverse people and leaders such as yourselves, that we've seen a general consensus where private sector, government, and the market actually agree that childcare is not just good for children and families, but also a key piece for economic productivity. So I think being able to get your language into the throne speech was a very big piece of that. So moving on, we've seen the impact with respect with our mutual advocacy and a lot of that media work we did last summer. So for example, a lot of the labor market access work that YWCAs are doing, we were submitting policy briefs, research reports. So there is in the federal budget that was announced last Monday, there is a budget line in there around labor market reskilling and upskilling. And this might also potentially be a competitive advantage or a window of opportunity for you at YWCA Edmonton, because you have that mental health expertise. So as the federal government scales up its labor market access programs, we know we're all suffering under the stress of COVID and the pressures around mental health. I mean, the way I like to talk about it is there are literally 7 billion humans right now all experiencing mental health distress. Yes, some of us might have more privilege than others, but quarantine and lockdown is stressful. So how do we then reskill and connect our service users, women, to jobs in the knowledge economy? And some of the local YWCAs are doing some very interesting work around data analytics and cybersecurity and connecting women to those jobs. So communicating those stories on a national scale has been very helpful. A lot of your work around that policy advocacy, both at a provincial level, at a local level, we were able to share those successes at a federal level, and over $850,000, or I believe that might be million, apologies, that might be a typo, around, again, getting women back into the workforce. And childcare. There's been a lot talked about around announcement, around getting women back to work and getting affordable, accessible, high quality childcare across the country. So there is a secretariat, but there's also billions of dollars that have been allocated to now flow through the provinces and the territories. So again, the work that you're doing at the provincial level, we're essentially speaking with the federal counterparts. So when we talk about the childcare pieces that we agree on, we can actually very much push common messaging, some of the really interesting learnings that you've seen either through the camp or through your girls programs, to really inform and building this new childcare system. So fundamentally, as grim as the pandemic is, there's a lot of really interesting places where we could go with our advocacy, and very much looking forward to having that conversation over the next few weeks and months. Going back to your mission statement and that alignment between the YWCA Canada mission statement, national advocacy, community action, the fact that you're focused on educating, empowering, and inspiring, Absolutely, the national office, we're thinking about, how do we help our member associations and how do we advocate for equity through a women's perspective? We have tens of thousands of Canadians signing our petitions, our campaigns. We have a lot of young people who are talking about the lockdown generation. So thinking about solutions for them. In terms of some, next steps with the federal budget, again, like with any government announcement, yes, they can make the announcement, but the devil is in the details. And we're going to be continuing to monitor spending, but also spending of those dollars in the budget announcement that I showed earlier, to also measure their impact on local YWCAs, but also to continue advocating to ensure that you can benefit and access that funding. So a few key things we're going to be watching for is how are they going to be thinking about addressing gender-based violence? This current federal government, if this government holds, and there's very interesting experiences of minority governments who, as volatile as a minority government situation can be, and there are rumors of an election in the fall, it's also an opportunity sometimes to get things done. And so coordinating a national action plan to end gender-based violence, especially because COVID has increased domestic violence rates anywhere between 20 to 30% across the country, we're going to be watching that closely. Accelerating their women's entrepreneurship strategy, pushing the government on some clear key performance indicators around procurement, and making sure that women, gender diverse people, that BIPOC entrepreneurs can also access those opportunities. We talked about childcare. Another piece that I think we're going to be talking a lot about is we had asked for a Feminist Response and Recovery Fund. There is a federal budget line that, because of YWCA Canada partnered with 5 other federations, including United Way Canada and YMCA. And there is now a budget line around sector stabilization. It's $400 million over the next few weeks. We'll be working around what the rollout looks like. And again, we're going to be watching very closely that women and gender diverse people are going to be centered in how that fund is rolled out to support the women's sector. But more importantly, we know that the major part of our workforce is gendered. It's also a gendered issue. So for nonprofits to survive, that actually impacts women and gender diverse people. And we also know that we're one of the biggest employers in the country. So we actually employ 2.5 million workers in the nonprofit sector right across Canada. And only, when you look at the fact that it's 15 million Canadians who are employed in general, that's actually a significant percentage. So we're also going to be doing advocacy and talking about, what does it mean to be a good employer, and that how do we not just survive this crisis, but also thrive. So for budget 2021, here's sort of 3 bullet points, some potential windows of opportunity where YWCAs across Canada will be called to step up and provide their expertise and knowledge. Very much looking forward to having these conversations. And again, really want to thank all of you for all of your work on doing advocacy and community development, grassroots, locally in Edmonton, also at the provincial level. And that's just been such a best practice and exciting story that has contributed to all 31 YWCAs and how we've been able to advocate on a pan-Canadian level in Ottawa. So here's my contact information. If you ever have a question or interest in getting involved, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you again for your time, and very much looking forward to continuing to collaborate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maya. On behalf of YWCA Edmonton and the staff and our board and alumni, I really want to thank you for your time tonight and just for sharing this information. It always fires me up when I hear from you and hear from AGM about the work that's being done. And it's exciting, and it's really, even though it's a very difficult time in our history, there's so much to be done and there's so much opportunity to make real change. So thank you for your work. And there's lots of stuff in the chat box to read. So please read our Feminist Recovery. Stay stay in touch and help us do this work. And so this segues us perfectly to our last part of the evening. We have one more speaker, and I always feel it's very important to end all meetings with a good call to action. You know, you've heard all this incredible information. What's next? And beyond donating and supporting us and all the things I've walked through, I'm really excited to introduce you tonight to Julie Charchun, who is a former board member of YWCA Edmonton and a former board president. And she's here tonight, and you can see her bio in the chat box. After she left our board in 2013, she went on to work as Edmonton Mayor Don Ivison's chief of staff. Where she leads a team that's contributed significantly to Mayor Ivison's success as one of Canada's most popular and well-respected big city mayors. As one of Canada's few female chiefs of staff in this capacity, Julie has led advocacy and negotiations on significant files, including LRT investments and city charters. And Julie joined the Y, as I said, in 2008 and served as our president in 2013. During her tenure, advocacy work was firmly embedded in the operations of the organization, and her passion for women's equity led to the research and development of several key internal white papers and policies regarding housing, childcare, and human trafficking. And the reason we have Julie here tonight is in 2019, she generously gifted $10,000 to the YWCA Edmonton to start an endowment fund called the YWCA Edmonton Stewardship Fund. And this is a fund that has been designed to support our advocacy work at the YWCA. So money to help us do this important work, being this powerful voice for equity in our community. And so we wanted to invite Julie to talk a bit about that endowment fund, and then we'll close out the evening after her presentation. Julie, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Catherine. You can hear me okay, I assume? Someone will give me okay, great. I'm seeing nods, thanks. Well, I'm joining you here from my bedroom, and I'm sitting on a yoga block. So if you see me tip over, you'll know why. It's good to see a number of familiar faces and lots of new faces. It's been really inspiring tonight to listen to the work of the board lately and to see how much the organization, frankly, has grown and matured since the time that I was on the board. So that's really wonderful. Catherine, I wanted to note that when I was deciding which jacket would get one night out this year, I picked this one because of the collar. I don't know if you can tell, but I too am a fan of a really great collar. So this is my ode to you. And I don't know if Maya is still here, but if she's not, I'll send this out into the universe. I just wanted to say thank you to Maya, especially for joining us live. I think that's a real COVID silver lining, actually, being able to have our national CEO join an AGM in real time. And I want to say thank you for the work that you're doing to establish the YWCA Canada, as you just articulated, as a relevant policy voice in our country. And as a more casual observer of the happenings at the YWCA these days, I've certainly noticed how your work is making a real and measurable difference. And I want to congratulate you on your work with Minister Freeland's task force and on a very successful and truly historic federal budget for women and childcare advocates. Congratulations, wonderful. It was a very proud day. The momentum that Maya has been talking about and Catherine has been talking about as well, and that you're building nationally, is something I hope that we can continue to harness here in Edmonton, building on, again, like I said, the very obvious focus on advocacy that Catherine has also brought to the role. But in order to do that, we need to be intentional about it. This is, in fact, the very reason that I established the YWCA Stewardship Fund, which is an endowment fund held by the Edmonton Community Foundation today. My hope and vision for this fund is that it will grow such that we can build the capacity we need for the policy and the research work locally to strengthen our position as one of the go-to voices in Edmonton on women's issues and to speak for women and their families. So I want to talk about the name of the fund for just a moment. The fund is named the YWCA Stewardship Fund because it's meant for those of you who I suspect, like me, joined the board as governors and stewards because you want our city to be a more equitable and safe place. So this is your opportunity to make a contribution to a dedicated fund with the sole purpose of building our organization's capacity to do the work needed, the advocacy work needed to get us there. And just to back up, Katherine mentioned it, but just to give a bit of my history, I was on the board. I was a board member from 2008 to 2013, spent a few years on the executive committee, served my last year as president. And during that time, Amber and I conspired to do a great deal of advocacy work, actually, which was mostly off the side of her desk. But we did a lot of work at the board level as well. And we got some pretty good work done, even though we had quite limited resources. We took a resolution on anti-human trafficking to the Y National AGM, which was years ahead of Paul Brandt, I will note. And we developed white papers and just had a lot of fun, as I recall. But of course, this work doesn't happen just because folks want it to. And frankly, I think we all know that in a not-for-profit context, we can't ask our staff to keep doing all of the things without actually resourcing them to do it. And that was the conclusion that I came to back in 2013. So since that time, a few things have happened for me. I took the chief of staff job in the mayor's office. I'm still standing. I had a son who is now almost 4, and my maternal grandmother, my last living grandparent, passed away. And as a result, a bit of inheritance came my way. My Oma, Ella Kruger, was a cold and difficult person, probably in part because she left Poland immediately following World War II and was living with what was likely some form of undiagnosed PTSD her entire life. We'll never know that for sure. But the point is, my Oma was a new immigrant to Canada who landed in Edmonton and had to learn English. Both she and my Opa worked labor jobs. She worked as a custodian at a junior high school and as a house cleaner. It was tough work, obviously, and not an easy life. And in many ways, I think her story is emblematic of new immigrant women and families to our city. So this is for her and for all women like her. The city builders whose names do not get mentioned at the big fundraisers, but whose work has been no less essential to building a better life for their families and for our community. Our goal with this fund is to raise $100,000. And I hope that you, as past and present stewards of our organization, and of the dreams and aspirations of women in Edmonton, can help. If you're able to contribute to the fund, you can reach out to me or, of course, to Katherine anytime. And in the meantime, I promise I will be in touch and I will keep you posted on our progress. So thank you again, Katherine, to you. Congratulations to you and your team and the organizers tonight for giving me this time to speak. Good night, take care, stay healthy.
Thank you so much, Julie. On behalf of YWCA staff and board and alumni, I just want to thank you again for your generosity and your service to our city in the mayor's office as well. And just being such a bright light. I've enjoyed our conversations over the last year, and I did not know that story about your Oma, and it really inspires me a lot, and I hope it inspires everyone on this call, because that is why we do this work. It is to make the lives better for all women, no matter who you are or where you come from, to create a world that's equal. So thank you to ending this on such an inspiring note. I'm going to turn it back over to Meghan to adjourn our 114th AGM. I hope you have been inspired, and thank you for coming tonight. Meghan, over to you.
Well, you said it, Katherine. I mean, I loved all of the tangible examples that Maya was providing of the real impact that's been made this year. And then for you to come in and just inspire us, Julie, with that generous gift, and certainly galvanize me to think, okay, what am I capable of? And where can I make a difference with my money? So thank you. Well, with that, I declare the 114th Annual General Meeting of YWCA Edmonton officially concluded. I will ask for all elected board members just remain in the Zoom room, and we're going to have a couple-minute meeting to officially appoint our board executive. So other than that, one last business matter. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. This was really great.